Okay, I believe we're now live on YouTube. This is my first YouTube live stream from the TEFL Development Hub, so it's all very exciting. So yeah, if you're watching, just let us know, and I'll see if I can find a way to find the messages and things. So this morning we've got an extra special Hub chat with an author, with two authors, because I'm one of the co-authors of the book, which is quite exciting. So joining me today is Fiona Mochlin, and we co-wrote a book for Delta Publishing called Teaching Teenagers, Unlocking Potential in the Young Adult Classroom. Fiona, do you have a copy of the book there?
No, I don't. However, this is sort of a good thing. I at TEFL, Delta gave me a copy of the book, but then they sold all the books that they had on the stand. And I'd already used it for my session on the Thursday, so I gave it back to them, and I'm waiting for my author's copy. But I have held it. I have had it in my hands. There is photographic evidence, some sort of floating around social media to this effect. But
Fantastic. Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, it was great seeing people holding the book up at
um,
IATEFL. And my sister's got a copy before me. She ordered it from Amazon, so
all
she sent
right.
me her photo as well.
No, it was. I mean, it was. It felt good. I mean, I have to admit, it did feel really good. I mean, I stood at the stand and chatted to the very, very nice people who were working on the stand as well. It's a really nice little group of ladies and one gent. Um, and uh, and yeah, lots of people were coming up and asking to order it and asking if they could have the like the one remaining copy kind of thing on the shelf, and it felt good. I spent an awful lot more time standing at the booth than I'd expected to. But uh, but yeah, it was good. And then BEBC had it as well because they were the ones who were actually selling it. Um, so yeah, but yeah, Amazon and also the Delta website and other places, BEBC have it. Yeah.
Yep, if you go to the Delta website, there's an option to click to buy it on Amazon, and also there's an option for local suppliers.
Yeah, local suppliers, national suppliers. Yeah, well, that's what they were doing at Delta because of at the booth because of the Brexit thing. It was easier for people to order from their country than yeah.
Mhm. Fantastic. So, the book, it's called Teaching Teenagers, but I mean, one of the
And
things that we
unlocking
mention,
is it unlocking the potential in young adults? I think is the kind of
yeah,
title.
yeah,
Yeah.
because one of the things that you mention in the first section of the book is the kind of the age range of
Mhm.
teenagers. It's not just from 13 to 19, is it?
No, well, you can't really. I mean, because we've got a section. The first section of the book is well, it's not entirely about the cognitive development, but there's a lot of it about how the brain develops. And it's not like a neat cutoff at 19. It's not like, well, hey, I'm 19, my brain's fully developed now. Um, it starts anywhere between about the age of 9, although that's not most people. Some girls, loosely speaking, start because it starts around about puberty, basically. Um, so sort of from the ages to 11 to approx 27, between 25 and 27. The brain kind of settles down.
Mhm.
I was going to say ends its development, but then it doesn't so much. It sort of starts deteriorating from there. But yeah, so adolescence, from the cognitive point of view, is from about age 11, although it can start earlier, to somewhere between 25 and 27, which
Mhm.
means it's not just teenagers um, that are relevant in the book, it's young adults as well.
Mhm.
And trainee teachers, all sorts of people.
Yes, definitely.
But this is it, if you're training teachers, the cognitive part of it is also relevant.
Mhm. Mhm. And so what sort of things do you look at in that first section of the book?
Um, I would say it's a combination of the brain, the physiological development. So, the brain, the hormones get a mention, myelination, which I can never pronounce. And then a little bit of psychology, and there's I suppose, a nod at social context. There's not much on it, but that's because, as you know, there's always a space limit when you're writing, so you have to sort of be selective. Um, because of the focus of the book, like there's not enough space perhaps for send topics, but then there are other resources for that.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, so stuff about cognitive development and psychology, and there's things like the importance of art, including art as well,
Mhm. Mhm.
and the beneficial effects that looking at art or listening to music, whatever, and also creating art even in the in the language. I know we're talking about the language classroom, but we can still bring that in. So that's in there as well. Um, I mean, literally, a really good book of research came out on that topic while we were writing. So, you know, the research in our book is very up to date, fresh from the press.
Fantastic.
I
And
got the book at Christmas and slipped it in that last month of writing.
how do you think reading that first section, obviously it's very theoretical, well, theoretical in that it's the background to the teenage brain and things. How do you feel that reading that would help teachers in the classroom?
Before I answer that, I'll just say, because you just said it's very theoretical. Yeah, it is theoretical, but as you know, I wrote it in a way that hopefully is very accessible as
It
well.
really is. It's a fun read.
Yeah, I was going to say a little anecdotes about my son learning to drive and stuff. Um, yeah, because it is like I just said, I can't. The word myelination, I can't. I don't even. It's a bit of a tongue twister. So yes, it is a quite tricky topic, and also it's one of those topics that um, when you start, it can start to go off in all sorts of different directions, which is why I've tried to write it as accessibly as possible. And I do think it's important because it's, well, as we say in the book, there are no silver bullets. Knowing about how the brain works is not going to answer all the questions. Um, as teachers, we know there isn't one solution for every student, but it adds another tool to the toolbox. It's also it's a bit like it's like if you're a parent of a teenager, it's difficult sometimes to understand your kid's behavior, and that can cause anxiety for you, the parent. Whereas if you know where it's coming from, then it's easier to just kind of go, okay, we'll get through this. And, it's a similar sort of thing that the busy teacher in a classroom, so much stuff can go on in the classroom that it can get the anxiety levels, particularly if you've got one particular class that is just kind of becomes that, I don't know how to put it, that thing every week we're going, oh no, I've got that one again. If you've got a sort of fairly detailed knowledge of what is going on in the brain, what is actually triggering some of those reactions in teens. And obviously all teens are different, but they'll go through similar things, and some it'll be more accentuated or more exaggerated than for others. And I think just understanding where that comes from and also having some strategies for dealing with it. It sounds like I'm talking only about problems. It's not. Some of the good stuff as well that maybe goes untapped. I'm thinking particularly of the section on contagion, which sounds like a negative word, but yeah. Um, the what's the name? Sarah Jane Blakemore did research into the beneficial effects of contagion, which
Mhm.
is the sort of teen desire to be part of the tribe and how behaviors of certain individuals in the tribe will spread
Mhm.
to others. I guess marketing people know this as well. But Sarah Jane Blakemore did an experiment on it, and then having read her stuff, I did one as well, so I put that in. So that kind of thing, strategies. I don't know. This is. I mean, I love it. I could talk about this for our entire conversation. You know that. I better shut up because it's not just about me. This conversation is to do with. But yeah, I mean, I really like the cognitive stuff, but I also wanted to make it as accessible as possible and be as helpful as
Mhm.
possible. And I think you'll agree, we've definitely squished the grotty teens kind of thing. I think that's partly why because we chose the cover, as you know, we were allowed to choose the cover of the book, and we went for the one with the doors, an image with doors, that unlocking potential,
Mhm. Mm.
because it's not putting out fires,
Yeah, definitely. I
and
mean, I think part of the issue, certainly when I started teaching teens, is I'd done my Cert TESOL, and I was quite lucky that when I did my Cert TESOL, some of my students were teenagers. Um, but they were a group of Hungarian students who'd come to the UK. They were lovely. They were so pleasant. They were so happy to be in the class. They were so eager to learn. And so that experience in no way prepared me for, Spanish teenagers who were coming to class
I knew that was
in
coming. Yeah,
in hot September weather when
I
they
know.
really didn't want to be there. And so
O'clock
I
in
think,
the
yeah,
afternoon in June. Yeah,
yeah. So if I'd had more of that knowledge
yeah.
of really what teenagers are like, because I mean, I was still officially a young adult when I started teaching, but you forget what it's like to be 12, 13, and
Yeah, you
dealing with
forget.
all of
And
those
actually, when
things.
you're 12 and 13, you don't know why you do certain things. So, you know, later on in life, when you're looking back, you can say, yeah, I was pretty grotty myself, but you still don't know why, where that was coming from.
Mm.
When I was a teenager, people didn't have that knowledge. There weren't MRI scans to look at the brain in action. You know, brain research is relatively recent because obviously you could only look at the brain and cadavers until
Mm.
about 12 years ago. Um, so yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it does. I think it does spin the plate, as it were, on the view on teens. It is a tricky age group to teach, and not everybody's going to enjoy it or want to do it. But
Yeah.
um, I think particularly it's of interest to teachers with experience, but I also think it should help newer teachers quite significantly. I wish I had known more. My first year teaching teenagers, I learned a lot very quickly, but it was more things like never wear a skirt. Which sounds silly, but yes. And I think apart from that first year where it was about me not knowing enough, I've only ever really had one difficult class.
Mhm.
And I often go back in my mind to think about that and think, why was it so difficult? And then I'll think, oh yeah, now I know this, I could have done that. And at the time I didn't. And I had been teaching for about 20 years by the time I had that class. It wasn't a
Mhm.
case of me being a novice. It was a difficult group. It did have some challenging people in the class. I'm
Mhm.
still in
Mhm.
touch with a couple of students. It had that effect as well, you know. But yeah, I just think the more tools that we have, not just to help our students, but to help ourselves as well,
Mhm.
can be very stressful.
I mean, I think as well that's one of the things that I reflected on when I did my kind of little author blurb at the front or at the back of the book. And it's not that when you start teaching any level, any group, that you automatically get better and better and better and better. Well, you do,
Yeah,
but
you
you'll still have
start.
those classes that are difficult.
Yeah,
So it's not that you have all your difficult classes at the beginning of your career and then you learn everything and it's plain sailing.
yeah.
Um, Similarly, I had the difficult class 10, 15 years into my career, and not the only one as well, but one that particularly stands out as being difficult. Mm,
Yeah, this is it. It's not just, I mean, because every student is different, yeah, obviously. But also every combination of students. So you can even take the same, say, three students from one class, put them in another group, and it will completely shift.
yeah.
Because every little community, each class is a community in a sense, has a different structure, different makeup. We get different relationships. They sort themselves out into the little hierarchies. Um, yeah, so I had that one class, but so it was in Seville. So when was I there? I was there, I went there 15 years after I started teaching. So
Mhm.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, hopefully, even if we don't get better classes every year, we've got a little bit more knowledge to be able to deal with them. I think that's
yeah.
the key.
And I now, because I don't work with, well, I do sometimes, but I don't work with Spanish kids as much now. I work with a lot of Japanese, Korean. I've actually been able to kind of expand my vision, should we say, or my perspective, because when you always work with European teenagers, I work with a lot with Central and Eastern European as well. So, but it's still geographically and culturally there are
Mm,
similarities. Yes, there are differences, but there are similarities. Whereas Japan, Korea, Taiwan, they've got a different educational culture there,
mm,
which has been fascinating to see if knowing what I know about the brain, I can apply that with them as well. And yes, I can.
mhm.
And it's added layers of, should we say, subtlety to it as well, which I find fascinating as well. So, yeah. Mm.
Well, I mean, we've kind of covered section A of the book, which is all the theory and the
Yeah.
background knowledge. What are the other two sections?
Activities is the middle one. And then section C is your baby.
Yeah, so section C is kind of reflection activities, and then we do address some of the challenges with working with young adults and suggest possible solutions. Again, every class is different. One solution might work with one class and just completely not work with another, but we've tried to address some of the typical problems that can occur. Mhm.
Yeah, and the activities, there are hundreds and hundreds of them.
I mean, I think with the activities, we kind of went a bit overboard, didn't we? And
We did. We went,
hopefully all of our favorites have got in, but I know that some of them had to end up on the cutting room floor.
yeah, I think having flicked through the final cut, there's I sort of, you can also do that, or how to adapt it, or alternative, or version A, version B. Um, we had a few visualization sort of using images as a launch pad in our original manuscript. I think they've got merged slightly, but yeah, no, there are lots of activities. Um, I was, and there was something very satisfying about looking at the index, which sounds silly, but it was to see, like the lists of it.
Yeah.
Because when we put in the proposal at the beginning, do you remember we had all the numbers? We said we reckoned there'd be this number of uh, activities on the South. We can talk about that in a moment. South and social. So this number of activities, and as we were going and we got really enthusiastic, we wrote more.
I think there's probably just over 100 in the final version,
Mm,
maybe. I mean, but we came up with easily 140, I think, between
yeah,
us.
Yeah, this is it. And I think within the ones that are in the book, there's very, as I say, there's like, and you could do this, and you could do that, you could do that.
Mhm.
But then, of course, we could write book two later on, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned kind of the different sections within Part B, which is all of these practical activities. Can you remember what all, did we end up with seven sections in the end or six?
Oh,
We
I
we
haven't
kept
counted.
rejigging things as
This is
well.
not. Do you know, I never counted how many sections. I think I've got my original notes somewhere around me here. Quick glance around. Oh, don't know how. Oh, yeah, there they are. They're at my feet. um, yeah, let's think. So it starts with self. So activities that are beneficial to the teenagers and a slightly more introspective sense of self-development or time with themselves. Um, that relate to forming their identity or kind of thing. It's like journaling is in there.
Mhm.
The second section is social, which is divided into two, and you will helpfully slot in what the two subtitles are.
Yeah, so when we first had the social section, we just had all the activities all together. But then Sandy Millen, who was our fantastic editor, huge shout out to Sandy,
Yeah.
she suggested kind of subdividing that section. So we've
Right.
got the social in terms of building rapport and those
Well,
activities that the students do to get to know each other better and for the teacher to get to know them as well. And then we've got the social in terms of teamwork and
yeah,
collaborative activities, maybe some competitive
collaborative,
elements.
cooperative, perhaps. Almost.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's using the course book.
Hmm.
There's using stuff.
Media. Media. I think we said media in the end because we
Media,
had
exactly.
songs and stories and
Yeah,
films.
and those from memory are organized according to what the stuff is, like the videos, the images, the music, the whatever. There's projects. I'm forgetting something. What's the one I'm forgetting?
The other one that we had was learning. So some
Oh
strategies
yeah.
to help develop better educational strategies, I guess, in terms of working with vocabulary and how students might store vocabulary.
Mhm.
Um, we talked a little bit as well about having notes and annotating and the use of
Yeah,
color to
learning
help with
strategies. Yeah.
memorization and things as well.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Maybe another section. I can't remember. There's quite a few there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, over 100
Look
activities.
at this notebook that's down here. This was the notebook that I used for all my notes while I was writing.
Oh, fantastic. I actually I had my TESOL France one because
Oh,
it was just after we were at TESOL France that you kind of talked about the book. So
yeah,
that became
exactly. It
mine.
was. It was a couple of months after, wasn't it? Yeah. I'm having a
Yeah.
glance through the headings in here. Projects, adapting course materials, stimuli. That's one that became media. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not wearing my glasses. So I'm
Fantastic.
holding them, but I'm not wearing them.
And so what would be one or two of your favorite activities? I mean, we're not 100% sure whether these versions of them are in the final cut, but what has worked particularly well for you with teens?
Um, Honestly, there are lots in there that I like a lot. I mean, I like, for example, I think it's called Story Monsters is the title we've given it in the book, something like that. And it's a story, building a story in three groups in the class, but based on listening to music.
Mm.
And then you have, it's a learning tree activity. I love my learning tree. Learning tree being the roots is where the roots is what the students know already, so what they already have, and you activate that. And then the tree trunk is like the target language, the thing that you are essentially trying to or hoping to teach, focus on, whatever it is. And then the crown of the tree, the leaves, the branches, whatever is the emergent language. And of course, bearing in mind that leaves drop and how to
Mm.
um, sort of recycle, reuse, reinforce memory techniques, whatever, to keep it there. But there's an activity in the book that kind of links back to the learning tree section. There's a section on learning tree in part A. But their activities, story monsters anyway, is how to activate the knowledge they already have. So they have one group of the class is thinking about a character, a person. One group in the class is thinking about a location, place, and the third group are thinking about creature, a monster or a creature. And then before you play the music, you brainstorm the kind of vocabulary that you might find in a story to describe a main character, to describe a location, to describe a monster. So one group's thinking about anything from eyes, nose, hair to armor or I don't know, cloak. Trying to think what witches have, broomstick, all that sort of stuff. Location would be, I don't know, dark, spooky stairs, moss, could be anything. And then the monsters, scales, claws, fiery breath, that sort of stuff. They brainstorm that. Then you ask them to listen to a little clip of music, about 30 seconds to a minute music. They're listening and they visualize their character, their location, and their monster. So the monster group are only imagining a monster.
Mhm.
Right? The location group are only trying to visualize a place, and to play the music. And it could be music like I often use Manuel de Falla's the overture to El Amor Brujo,
Mhm.
which is a fantastic piece of music. Um, and then when they've visualized, they can take little notes if they need, they can add vocabulary. Then in their little group, they discuss and compare the monsters that they had, compare the locations, compare the people. And then they share it with the group. And each group has to listen to the other group because then they're going to steal ideas to write their group story or write their individual story or their story in pairs. So, this group over here is going to describe all the monsters that they created between them. They will have, just explaining to each other, they will have expanded the description.
Mhm.
The others are listening and they're going, oh, I'll borrow, steal that one, I'll steal that one. I'll have a sea monster, I'll have a sea monster and a mini monster, whatever it is. Then the locations. And you also find that you say, for example, particularly location character, you say, listen and visualize location. But if you, the teacher, choose your music cleverly, they will actually visualize more than one location. So if
Mhm.
the mood of the music changes slightly, they might see two. And then, and that doesn't matter. They'll go, oh, I saw two. And you go, doesn't matter. Better.
Excellent.
Anyway, once they've shared all their things, then they steal from each other. You discuss it. You can write, if they want, can you write that on the board? So you write the more vocabulary on the board, and then they work together or separately as you prefer
Mhm.
to write their story.
I
And
mean, just listening to that as well, obviously when we were working through the activities, we've kind of suggested what level they're suitable for, but so many of them are really easily adaptable. So with this
yeah,
one, very simple vocabulary,
yeah, I mean,
dark,
you're thinking, as I
scary,
said just
big.
now, fiery breath of scales. Okay, no, maybe not. They're not at the brain stage, but you can become a resource. And when they're going,
Absolutely.
teacher, how do you say,
Yeah.
keep that in, feed it in. So you've got the language that they have, the language that they need, and the language that they want. And those three things all come together. And having used a lot of musical descriptions in my classes, I've realized that it becomes a technique that students use by themselves because they realize that it helps them have something to say when they've got to do a description or write a story, descriptions in particular. And I'll see my students sitting in exams kind of going, and they try, yeah. then they're like using, they
Mm,
know that if they can imagine music, that it might
mm,
help them with their descriptions, and it vastly improves their writing massively because it's a motivating thing. It's like, oh my goodness, I've got something to say. You know, I know what I can say because it's the same for adults, but it's worse for teenagers. That feeling of, oh, I don't have any good ideas. What am I going to do? The other people in my class, their ideas are better than mine, which can be really accentuated by teachers who then read out the good stories or don't think we do that much anymore, but I went through that at school. You know,
mhm, mhm.
it was at that time perceived to be a carrot as opposed to a stick. If you're really good, we'll read it out. But then it also put a tremendous amount of pressure on to have a good idea.
Yep, yep. Yeah, and I think as well, in terms of generating ideas, language education is very different to so many other subjects where they are fed knowledge and
Exactly, yeah.
the
They just have to, yeah.
yeah.
The AI comes into this a little bit. It's about this is
Mhm,
going off at a tangent very slightly, but it's yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine at the weekend who teaches academic English. I do that sometimes, but not as much. That's basically what she does. And she was saying, yeah, AI is quite an issue at the moment because it's quite hard to detect in academic essays because they're very formulaic and you're
mm,
basically quoting all the time. You know? Whereas in anything creative and language teaching, hopefully we will reboot, should we say, or move back towards creativity a little bit, if only because it's much easier to detect AI use.
yeah.
Um, much, much easier. I've tried, I've practiced, I've had a look, been doing a bit of playing about with Chat GPT and stuff just to see what happens, and the creative stuff is useless. It's just you read it going, what?
Yeah.
So, a student who uses AI to create a story is going to be fairly easy to spot.
Mm.
Yeah. Before I ask you what your favorite activities are, though, apart from that kind of thing where it's visualization, which I love, either from teacher's voice or music or images or whatever, the teachers as students, that's teachers as students, the students as teachers activities. There's a whole chunk of those, I think,
Mm.
I forget if it's in self social, whichever section, one of the first sections in the book. Because there's lots of ways you can do that, getting them doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of at the heart of all of our activities is that the students are involved, it's personalized, um, and yeah, and giving them more power within the classroom, whether it's to
Yeah.
express their ideas or to take on different roles.
Yeah, well, it
Mhm,
gives them more purpose to actually use the language. They're not just
mhm,
answering questions, they're asking them, and they're asking them whilst in the role of the teacher. Yeah, it's very empowering. I notice it with my Japanese, particularly Japanese students in their home country. They don't speak much in class at all. They listen and they don't express opinions. That's not a cultural thing.
mhm,
Um, and then, the first 2 weeks here, they struggle, admittedly, but then it just clicks and they love it. They love that kind of, they feel sort of empowered. Yeah, and the progress suddenly just kind of goes. Which are your favorite activities in the book?
Oof. Well, I mean, I've mentioned before in the hub, my favorite ever activity is definitely maybe. So that was in there. And another one I really like, and I can't remember
I
now.
mentioned that. I'll go back to definitely maybe. Give a bit of an outline. I waffled for 10 minutes on mine.
So definitely maybe you nominate one, well, after you've modeled the activity yourself, you nominate a student to talk about a topic. And then before they speak, you give everyone in the class time to think of 5 words they're definitely going to hear and 5 words maybe they'll hear. So there's
Uh-huh.
that kind of prediction, little bit of critical thinking of what might this topic involve. And the reason I like this as well is that whilst the rest of the class are writing their predictions, that student who's going to be speaking can start thinking and planning a little bit what they're going to say. And so then when the student is speaking, everyone else in the class is listening. Again, fantastic, as often our teenagers aren't so good at really listening when someone else is speaking. So they listen and they tick any of the words they heard. You can have an extra step where they, after the person is finished speaking, the class can ask questions to try and elicit some of the words that they have that haven't been said. And then they count up points. They get 2 points for every tick in the definitely column and 1 tick in the maybe column. And to be honest, even when people don't score very many points, they enjoy the activity. They enjoy that process of listening quite intently for
Mm.
the words that they might have said. And then it gets them thinking as well, why didn't they say these words? Were they not very good words? Was it just that their talk went in a different direction? So yeah, so that's definitely maybe one of my favorite ever. Um,
These activities that give a reason for listening are key, I think. Yeah.
mm,
But like we've got, is it three truths and a lie in there as well, haven't we? In different
yeah.
versions of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh. What else? What else? Sorry.
No, it's good. It's good. So yeah, so the other one, like I say, I don't know whether it ended up in the self or the social in the end, because we were umming and ahhing which
Yeah, well,
section
there
to
were a
put it in.
couple of, yeah.
But it's called Who Am I? And I often use it at the beginning of a course. So you draw a cloud again as the teacher modeling the activity, draw a cloud on the board with your name, whoever you are. So, for example, most people who are English call me T, but here in Spain, I'm Teresa or Tere. Then, obviously, my sisters, one of them calls me Little Sis, Sis. Um, Neither of them have children, but for my friends' children, I'm Auntie T. So it gets you thinking about who you are, your
Yeah.
not your personality, but yeah, how you interact with different people. So I get the students again to draw the cloud and write all their different names around it. And I think as well, it's also quite nice, depending on the context you're in, to get them thinking about the pronouns they use.
Uh-huh.
Just again, getting them to think about who they are, their identity.
Who
And
other
then
and who other people are.
mm, mm,
Other people's identities
exactly.
in that
Yeah.
one I think would come
And
under.
then for the teacher as well, it gives you a clear idea of, well, not a clear idea, it gives you a better idea of who people are. And then they talk about all their different names with a partner. And then as well, you can say to them, well, what's your name in the classroom? Because I think often as well, when you're faced with this register at the beginning of the year, um, sometimes as well, depending on the students, if the teacher says Francisco Javier, they go yes, and then they end up being Francisco Javier for the whole year, whereas in actual fact everyone calls them Curro or things
Yeah.
like that. So I think then as a teacher, if you can say to your students, who are you in the classroom? What's your name when you're with me? It makes them feel much more comfortable and confident and included. And it sets up a better relationship, I think, than this is your name on paper, this is what I'm going to call you for the next 9 months.
That reminds me of something that happened to me in the Canaries. Something, sorry, in the Canary Islands, as you may know, quite a lot of the names are from the Guanches, all right, the original people of the Canary Islands, which means there's some, let's say, less familiar names. Somebody moving there, names like Guasimara, Chaxiraxi, these sort of things. And I had a student who the first day, and he was a teenager, first day, get the names. I can't think why, but I didn't have, I think we only had surnames on our initial register, something like that. And Canarian people have got lovely voices. They speak quite quietly, though. There's a nice sort of musicality to the way they speak, which sometimes makes names a little bit difficult to catch, because you might hear the middle of the word and not catch the beginning or the end.
Mhm.
So, like Alejandro would be Alejandro. So you kind of get this. You hear it's Alejandro. Anyway, this chap, I asked him what his name was, and he told me. And I then proceeded to call him by the wrong name for the first term, right? A whole term. And it was only at Christmas that when his parents came in for Parents' Day, and I referred to him as, I think I called him Jonathan, um, that they said, "Why are you calling him that?" And I said, "Well, isn't it his name?" And they said, "No, his name is." My goodness. And I was really apologetic. And I said to the student, "Why didn't you never correct me?" And then he just said, he said, he said, "Because actually I liked it much better when you called me."
Oh,
He liked it. He said he felt like it was his special English classroom name. And that was it. So he'd never corrected me. And I just think so. Yeah, I think delving into names is one of these our identities, and how we can actually, if in his case, he said to me he didn't actually particularly like his name, and it made him. I don't know. He'd felt better in a way that I'd misheard him or misunderstood, and had kind of given him a new name, and he loved his English identity because of it. So names are really important, and that
yeah, yeah.
what's your name, and also, and what would you like me to call you? What would you like to be in this room? Make it a space, a safe space.
I had a young learner one time. He was only maybe 6 or 7. And if you asked him what his name was, he'd say Frank Brown, because his name in Spanish was Francisco Moreno.
All right.
He just decided anytime he was in English class, Frank Brown.
Right, right. This is it. Identity is a key part. I mean, in teenage years, I mean, we know this, but it is psychologically and cognitively everything. It's a very big part of adolescence. It's when we're forming rather our identity. Um, it's, I think, I think it's safe to say we can, I don't know about all, but a lot of us, if you look back on teen years, there is a sort of a fuzzy "who am I" stage in there. I remember going back, um, even in terms of sexuality, gender, that all that sort of thing. I'm tall. I was very skinny. I just at that time I went through a very strong "who am I" stage. Lots of teenagers do. So I think this sort of allowing space for people for our students to find an identity for the English classroom, because speaking another language, I mean, you're probably the same. When you speak a second language, you kind of take on a slightly different personality.
Mhm.
And that's not just us speaking Spanish or whatever, French or Japanese or whatever your second language is. It works the other way as well. Our students can use the English classroom as a space to experiment with who they are and take on another identity if they want to, or if they want to, try it on for size. But we
Mm.
have to be the ones to give them space to do that
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
support them so that they feel safe, and nobody's going to, laugh at them.
Mm. Yep.
But yeah, I know that "who am I" is important on a lot on, different levels. What else do you like?
Um, oh, I'm trying to think now. Um,
Well, what
there
about
was
your section C?
section C. Oh, yes, because it's quarter to 12 already. we, we were like, oh yeah, we'll chat for about 20 minutes. So, section C, again, assuming everything made it into the final cut because there was too much again, I think. So we start out with some reflection activities for teachers because obviously this is part of the Delta Publishing Teacher Development series. So reflection is a huge part of developing as a teacher, I think. And I
Yeah,
think as well, again, uh, we've talked about, the balance of teaching teenagers, and it's not all bad, and you can have these wonderful moments as well. I think as teachers, we often tend to remember the bad. And so the reflection activities are as well to help you focus on the positives
yeah,
in the lessons. What went well, why did it go well, and could I take what worked and use it in a difficult class as well. So I think there's only maybe 5 or 6 reflection activities. But again, not just for working with teenagers, they're reflection activities that you could do with any class, with any level, at any stage in your teaching career as well. And then the second part of section C addresses some typical challenges and provides potential solutions. So there's things like the typical situation where you've got a class that's quite cliquey and there are definite groups within the class
yeah,
and some strategies to try and help them build rapport and work a little bit more cooperatively. The challenges of using L1 in the classroom as well, and some
yeah,
strategies to potentially help there. What else did we mention? Again, you mentioned at the beginning there's just not enough space in the book to cover everything. And so, for example, inclusivity, one of the challenges I think is I've heard a lot about inclusivity. What does it mean for my classes? So again, a very brief, this is what inclusivity is. Here's some kind of ideas to look for more resources. So yeah, hopefully, I think it's again, you mentioned the book not being a silver bullet. It's not that you'll read the challenge, read the advice, put it into practice, and everything will be perfect. But I think as well for teachers who are going through difficult periods or
yeah,
having challenges, just reading that and knowing that these are problems. They're problems that every teacher faces. They are quite typical problems. So that can help you feel not so alone. And because we've all had that class where you just leave thinking, why am I doing this? I'm just the worst teacher ever. That I was not cut out for this. So yeah, having that support of everybody has these challenges, and these things
yeah,
might help. Hopefully, can be a bit more of a positive spin.
yeah. I think challenges and reflection go together, don't they? Reflecting on how and what. I mean, that's how come we ended up writing this book because we reflected for years and years.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I also think, speaking of inclusivity, there's an activity, as far as I know, we wrote one. There's an inclusivity activity in the book as well. Inclusivity videos one,
Hmm.
diversity,
Hmm. Yeah.
diversity.
Ah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And I think as well, one thing that we've definitely realized is that anything that doesn't make it into the book gives us lots of fodder for sessions, for promoting the book as well and going, if you liked this activity, this is the
yeah,
one that didn't make it. There's loads more.
yeah. Well, I mean, that's the nature of publishing, um, and also it is good to not have everything in the one book. Then it does give us scope for more in the future.
Mhm.
It was good. Um, Speaking of publishing, you wanted me to
So I mentioned to Fiona beforehand that I've had a couple of chats recently with people who have self-published, and it was really interesting to hear about their journey and how they approached that. Um, but obviously, this is a book for a well-established international publisher. So I was hoping Fiona could tell us a little bit about that process.
Yeah, it's well, obviously it's quite different. So Delta approached me um a year ago. No, can't remember. Yeah, about a year ago
In
actually.
December 2022.
I've lost track. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it might even been after that because I think it was IATEFL. Um, but anyway, they approached me and asked me if I'd be interested in writing the teenagers book for their teacher development series, and I said yes, I would. and and then they asked me to go away and decide who I would like to write it with. And so I went away and I did that. And I thought, I want to write it with T, who I have known since she did her initial teacher training, because I was one of her teacher trainers at that time, on the young learner course that you did. And I
Mhm.
thought, and I've sort of been following your career since. And I thought, okay, same wavelength. I think it's important. Any writer is probably going to say the same. Um, we all know our strengths and weaknesses, and therefore it's always important to choose somebody not just that you get on with, but that you know will sort of balance out.
Mhm.
Um, and then, even though the publisher had asked me if I'd be interested, so they came to me, we still had to draw up a proposal. You don't just write what you want. You
Mhm.
draw up a proposal, outline what you think the book will look like, why you think the world needs this book, kind of thing, what problems it will solve, market, so on and so forth. And then that goes away. Basically, then they come back to you and they say yes or no, or we'll change that, or whatever, and you discuss that. Start writing. Obviously, there's in our case, our editor is also a series consultant. That is not always the case, but it was in this case. So it was Sandy Millen was the editor, and it's the series consultant. Um, and then you go and you write, basically, and you write drafts, and you write. Uh, we didn't need too many drafts. We didn't do too many changes. Did some bits and bobs, but yeah, it was okay. We then obviously some things got slightly rearranged. We were originally only going to have self one block of activities, social one block, and social because there were so many got subdivided, that kind of thing. And then it disappears off. We were very lucky. We didn't choose the title. That's very unusual to choose the title. You're given you know publishers do that, marketing departments decide. They take that kind of decision. But we did get to choose the kind of subtitle thing, which is unusual, and it's extremely unusual to choose the cover. We were very lucky there. From memory, Delta originally asked us, would you like this one, or this one? And we kind of said no to all the
Mhm.
options. So they
I,
said,
yeah, I
yeah, we
think
did.
'cause there were kind of people,
There were
weren't there? And we
people,
talked about
yeah,
it aging
exactly. There
very
were people
quickly
on
as
the
well.
pick, and we said no because then by definition you're excluding somebody is not being represented. So they allowed us to choose. They told us where to look, but we went away and chose, and we chose a couple, and one was rejected by a publisher because it was too similar to another one that they had, but, and the other one, The Doors. So yeah, we actually had quite a lot of power um, within the process, which is unusual. You don't normally get that amount. We were very lucky. We worked with a lovely team, small team, lovely team there. And yeah, so that's kind of how it goes. And then now we're at the stage where the book has come out. I've done a talk at ITEFL,
Mm.
Um, Not overtly or hardcore sell kind of promotion, but yeah. And I spent time on the booth there. And then moving forward, I imagine there'll be more promotion on the horizon then.
Yep, yep. I'm speaking in Barcelona at the university, the Escola de Idioma Modern, but it's a very small session. It's not part of a big conference. Thank you to Jessica McKay for inviting me to come and speak. But I think as well, I mean, you mentioned it's not a kind of sell session. Um, I kind of think the book sells itself. It's
Yeah,
so jam-packed of
no, I hope
activities.
so. I don't kind of feel like I need to go out and sell the book, but I am passionate about what I do, and therefore I'm passionate about what's in the book.
Mhm.
I like even at IATF, I didn't sort of adapt my session or write it for the book. In fact, I wrote it. I wrote the proposal for IATF before um, Delta said they would sponsor me. So it was kind of already in my head, based on other stuff that I'd been doing, but the stuff that made it into the book, but made it into it came from me first, made it into the book, but that's what I wanted to talk about anyway. It wasn't the other way around. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I just love what I do, and therefore I love what's in the book, and I love what we've created together. Hopefully that translates. Hopefully you can feel it in the pages of the book. Um, so yeah, it's not like writing a course book. A course book, a lot of it is the decisions are taken by a publisher, for example.
Mm.
Whereas it does feel like our baby.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Awesome. Well, I will share links to our baby on the Delta Publishing website. We've given a huge thank you to Sandy, our editor, but also a huge shout out to Kate Barde, who
yeah,
is the commissioning editor over at Delta. So thank you to her as well for all her support in the
yeah.
process. And yep.
And thank you to anybody who's actually watched this.
Yep. Now I'll see whether my YouTube live stream actually works. I'm going to share a link to this video back in the hub as well so that people know where to find it. But yep, thank you. We have had a few people watching. Lovely to see you.
Find us
Um,
on LinkedIn. Join us at Spill the ELT on Tuesdays.
yes, I'll share a link to that as well. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Fiona, for coming along to join me this morning for our
Have you
inaugural
been?
YouTube live stream.